I know y'all see I didn't post no video yesterday. I got my kid on the floor talking. But what happened was, you need one crayon, baby. One crayon, one color pencil, one something. So, man, y'all, I told y'all what happened. Hmm? No, not using red. Use another color. Use brown. I know. Yeah. So, apparently, the school has been whatever. I'm not even gonna talk about it. I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait till Monday to talk about that situation because I don't want to say the wrong thing. But this situation that I told about the other day before yesterday, I'm gonna talk about that. So they sent me an email telling me I was good. They reposted the video. Now I know, like, okay, so why isn't the video on the channel? Okay, because first of all, it was cut off. The report was made mid during the live, so like right now, I'm live. Woo. And then I hit a turn. Boom, came back to me. Had it on me, woo, woo, did a lot of talking, did a lot of blah, 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 blah. And then it cut off. No, the problem is, sometimes, not a problem, because, I don't have a problem with YouTube taking shit out, moving shit, all other shit. But anyway, the problem was that the piece, it only kept the piece that was reported. It didn't keep the whole video. So the only part of that video that was reported was about 7 minutes worth out of a 30-minute video. Only 7 minutes worth. So I tried to go live today, and I couldn't. And I'm like, what the fuck? So I look it up. Now, mind you, what I got was a warning. So technically, because it was a warning, I shouldn't have faced any punishments at that time, right? But mind you, at first I was like, okay, it's a warning. I'm just gonna take it for what it is. But then something said, please go to the studio and see exactly what was reported. Of course, once again, I already told y'all this. It kind of blew my mind to see that I was reported. Not Elijah, but I was reported on my channel. And once again, the report was saying that, you're not supposed to let minors feel go live by themselves. Mind you, we're talking about me. And they're talking about my kids. Me. I know y'all like, why do you keep saying that? Because. But then the next thing we got to talk about. Oh, yeah, I can't turn the whole camera because I can't do my voice. Come on. Come on over here. So the next thing we got to talk about. I know that we was talking about. I noticed that the conversation is why are black families so aggressive? Why are females so aggressive? My favorite book is Black Boy. And it never really occurred to me that this book was written a long ass fucking time ago. But it highlighted some of the problems that we have as black families. And one of them being the need not to say nothing. Or the parent over Elijah, come on. No, go on and do your work. I heard it. Yes, it was. It hit my leg. Yep. Go on do your work. So if you gotta color the first one. You gotta find the seeds, and then you gotta color your cat. Come on. Where's your color pencil? Color pencil? I got it right. I ain't taking it out. Don't break that. Come on. In the first chapter, and I know y'all like to, it's not like it was back then. You know what? I'm actually about to read a chapter of that book. That's what this video is gonna be. Cause it's been a minute since I read Black Boy. But in the first chapter, the mama was working a lot, and the son ended up being at home by himself, and he ended up wandering the streets looking for something to do, and then he ended up getting taken into bar where he became a drunk. Oh, what page am I on? I am. Yeah, I know I'm in chapter 1. That's why I was trying to see where I am at. Okay, I'm sorry if I am rereading this chapter. Chapter 2. The glad days that dawned gave me liberty for the free play of impulse and from anxiety and resentment, restrainment. I leaped to license and thoughtless action. My mother arrived one afternoon with the news that we were going to live with her sister in the land, Arkansas, and that en route we would visit Granny, who had moved from Nazareth to Jackson, Mississippi. As the words fell from my mother's lips, a long and heavy anxiety lifted from me. Excited, I rushed about and gathered my ragged clothes. I was leaving the hated home, hunger, fear, leaving days that had been as dark and lonely as death. While I was packing, a playmate came to tell me that one of my shirts was hanging down up on the clothesline. Filled more with a sense of coming freedom than with generosity, I told him that he could have it. What was a shirt to me now? The children stood about and watched me with envious eyes as I crammed my things into a suitcase. Oh, hold on. So before I start this, let me tell y'all what it was at. All right, you gonna eat this first before you do that? No, you gonna eat one, and when you done, you eat another one. So their mama had took them to the orphan, so she had left them in the orphan for a little bit. Yeah, they could do that back then. Like you just leave your kid at the orphanage so you get stuff together. Now you, the little boy had already, she done beat him half to death because he set the house on fire. I did not even think of saying goodbye to the boys and girls with whom I had eaten and slept and lived with for many weeks. My mother scolded me for my thoughtlessness and begged me to say goodbye to them. Reluctantly, I obeyed her, wishing that I did not have to do so. As I shook the dingy palms extended to me, I kept my eyes averted. Now I wanted to look again into faces that hurt me because they had become so thoughtfully associated in my feelings with hunger and fear. And shaking hands, I was doing something that I was to do countless times in the years to come. Acting in conformity with what others expected of me, even though by the very nature and form of my life, I did not and could not share their spirit. After I had outlived the shocks of childhood, after the habit of reflection had been born in me, I used to mull over the strange absence of real kindness in Nicholas. How unstable was our tenderness, how lacking in genuine passion we were, how void of great hope, how timid our joy, how bare our conditions, how hollow our memories, how lacking we were in those intangible sentiments that bind man to man, and how shallow were even our despair. After I had learned other ways of life, I used to brood upon the unconscious irony of those who felt the Negroes led so passionate an existence. I saw that what had been taken for our emotional strength was our negative confusions, our flights, our fears, our frenzy under pressure. Whenever I thought of essential bleakness of black life in America, I knew the Negroes had never been allowed to catch the full spirit of Western civilization. That they lived somehow in it, but not of it. And when I brought up on the cultural barrenness of black life, I wondered if clean, positive tenderness, love, honor, loyalty, and the capability to remember were native women. I asked myself if these human qualities were not fostered, one, struggled and suffered for, preserved in ritual from one generation to another. Granny home in Jackson was an enchanting place to explore. It was a two-story frame structure of 7 rooms. My brother and I used to play hide and seek in the long, narrow halls, and, and on and under the stairs. Granny's son, Uncle Clock, had bought her this house. And its white plaster walls, its front and back porches, its round columns and banisters made me feel that surely there was no finer house in all round world. There were wide green fields in which my brother and I roamed and played and shouted. And there were the timid children of the neighbors, boys and girls to whom my brother and I felt superior in worldly knowledge. We took pride in them telling it was what it was like to ride on a train, what the yellow sleepy Mississippi River looked like, how I felt to sail on the Kate Adams, what Memphis looked like, and how I had run off from the orphan home. And we would hit that we were pausing for but a few days, and then we'd be off to even more fabulous places and marvelous experiences. That's not the color pencil you had. So while you was trying to be slick and make simple remarks, that's not what you had got out the box. But okay, I guess you go in there and get into something else out the box. To help support the household, my grandmother boarded a colored school teacher, Ella. A young woman was so remote and dreamy and silent in manner that I was so much afraid of her as I was attracted to her. I had long wanted to ask her to tell me about the books that she was reading, always reading, but I could never quite summon enough courage to do so. One afternoon, I found her sitting alone upon the front porch reading. Ella, I begged, please tell me what you are reading. It's just a book, she said evasively, looking about with apprehension. But what's it about? I asked. Your grandmother wouldn't like if I talked to you about novels, she told me. I detected a note of sympathy in her voice. I don't care, I said loudly and bravely. Shh. You mustn't say things like that, she said. But I want to know. When you grow up, you read books and know what's in them, she explained. But I want to know now. She thought a while, then closed the book. Come here, she said. I sat at her feet and lifted my face to her. Once upon a time, there was an old man named Bluebeard, she began in a low voice. She whispered to me the story of Bluebeard and his 7 wives, and I ceased to see the porch, the sunrise, the sunshine, her face, everything. As her words fell upon my new ears, I endured them like a reality that welled up from somewhere within me. She told me how Bluebeard had duped and married his 7 wives, how he had loved and slain them, how he had hanged them up by their hair in a dark closet. The tale made the world around me be thawed, live. As she spoke, reality changed. The look of things altered, and the world became peopled with magical presence. My sense of life deepened, and the feel of things was different somehow. Enchanted and enthralled, I stopped her constantly to ask for details. My imagination was blazed. The sensations the story aroused in me were never to leave me. When she was about to finish, when my interest was keenest, when I was lost to the world around me, Granny stepped briskly onto the porch. You stop that, you devil girl, she shouted. I want none of that devil stuff in my house. Her voice jarred me, so I gasped. For a moment, I did not know what was happening. I'm sorry, Miss Wilson, Ella stunted, rising. But he asked me. He's just a foolish child, and you know it, Granny blazed. Ella bowed her head and went into the house. But Granny, she didn't finish, I protested, knowing that I should have kept quiet. She bared her teeth and slapped me across my mouth with the back of her hand. You shut your mouth, she hissed. You don't know what you're talking about. But I want to know what happened, I wailed, dodging another blow that I thought was coming. That's the devil's work, she shouted. My grandmother wasn't nearly white as a Negro. Can't get without being white, which means that she was white. The sagging flesh of her face quivered. Her eyes, large, dark, deep-set, wide apart, glanced at me. Her lips narrowed to a line. Her high forehead wrinkled. When she was angry, her eyelids drooped halfway down over her pupils, giving her a baleful aspect. But I like the story, I told her. "You gonna burn in hell," she said with such furious conviction that for a moment I believed her. Not to know the end of the tale filled me with a sense of emptiness, loss. I hungered for the sharp, frightening, breathtaking, almost painful excitement that the story had given me. And I vowed that as soon as I was old enough, I would buy all the novels there were and read them to feed that thirst for violence that was in me, for intrigue, for plotting, for scenery, for bloody murder. So profoundly repulsive a chord had the tale struck in me that the threats of my mother and grandmother had no effect whatsoever. They read my intents as merely absurdity, as foolish, something that would quickly pass. And they had no notion how desperate, serious the tale had made me. They could not have known that Ella's whispered story of deception and murder had been the first experience in my life that had elicited from me a total emotional response. No words or punishments could have possibly made me doubt. I had tasted what to me was life, and I would have more of it somehow, some way. I realized that they could not understand what I was feeling, and I kept quiet. But when no one was looking, I would slip into Ella's room and steal a book to take back of the bar and try to read it. Usually, I could not decipher enough words to make the story have meaning. I burned to learn to read novels, and I tortured my mother into telling me the meaning of every strange word I saw. Not because the word itself had any value, because it was the gateway to a forbidden and enchanted land. One afternoon, my mother became so ill that she had to go to bed. When night fell, Granny assumed the task of seeing that my brother and I bathed. She set 2 bathtubs of water in our room and ordered us to pull off our clothes, which we did. She sat at one end of the room, knitting, lifting her eyes now and then from the wool to watch and direct us. My brother and I splashed in the water, playing, laughing, trying our utmost to fling suds into each other's eyes. The floor was getting so sloppy that Granny scolded us. "Stop that foolishness and wash yourself." "Yes, ma'am," we answered automatically and proceeded with our plan. I scooped up a double handful of suds and called to my brother. He looked at our flood of slugs, but he ducked and the white foam splattered onto the floor. "Richard, stop that playing and bathe." "Yes, ma'am," I said, watching my brother to catch him unaware so I could fling more suds at him. "Come here, you Richard," Granny said, putting her knee on the side. I went to her, walking sleeplessly and naked across the floor. She snatched the towel from my hand and began to scrub my ears, my face, my neck. Bend over, she ordered. I stooped, and she scrubbed my anus. My mind was in a sort of daze, midway between daydreaming and thinking. Then, before I knew it, words whose meanings I did not fully understand had slipped out of my mouth. "When you get through, kiss back there." I said the words rolling softly, un, uh, prematurely. My first indication that something was wrong, but Granny became terribly still. Then she pushed me violently from her. I turned around and saw that her white face was frozen, that her black, deep-set eyes were blazing at me unblinkingly. Taking my cue from her curious expression, I knew that I had said something awful. But I had no notion at the moment just how awful it was. Granny rose slowly and lifted the wet towel high above her head and brought it down across my naked back with the outraged fury of her 60-year-old body, leaving an aching streak of fire burning and shivering on my skin. I gasped and held my breath, fighting against the pain. Then I howled and screamed. I had not realized the meaning of what I said. Its moral horror was unfelt by me, and her attack seemed without cause. See, she didn't even stop to tell him why he was getting a whooping. And nobody's gonna tell him why he getting a whooping. And struck me again with such force that I dropped to my knees. I knew that if I did not get out of her reach, she would kill me. Naked, I rose and ran out of the room screaming. My mother hurried from her bed. "What's the matter, Mama?" she asked Granny. I lingered in the hallway, trembling, looking at Granny, trying to speak but only moving my lips. Granny seemed to have gone out of her mind, but she stood like stone, her eyes dead upon me, not saying a word. "Richard, what have you done?" my mother asked. Poised to run again, I shook my head. "What's the matter, for God's sake?" my mother asked of me, of my brother, turning her face from one to another. Granny wilted, half turned, from the towel to the floor, then burst into tears. I was trying to wash him," Granny whimpered. "Here," she continued, pointing, "and that black-lipped devil. Her body was shaking when it started to rain. She told me to kiss him there when I was through. Now my mother stared without speaking. No, my mother saying. He did. Granny whimpered. He didn't say that, my mother protested. He did, Granny said. I listened, vaguely knowing now that I had committed some awful wrong that I could not undo. That I had uttered words I could not recall, even though I ached to nullify them, kill them, turn back time to the moment before I had talked so that I could have another chance to save myself. My mother picked up the red towel and came toward me. I ran into the kitchen, naked, yelling. She came hard upon my heels, and I scuttled into the backyard, running blindly into the dark. Butting my head against the fence, the tree, bruising my toes on sticks of wood, still screaming. I have no way of measuring the gravity of my wrongs, and I assumed that I had done something for which I would never be forgiven. Had I known just how my words had struck them, I would have remained still taking my punishment. But it was a feeling that anything or would happen to me that made me wild with fear. Come here, you little filthy fool. See, you know what I'm saying? Nobody took the time to explain to him what he did wrong. It was like, just hop on the beating plane. And it's like, I know now it would be wrong, but you gotta understand that this is how parents raise their kids for the longest, to not explain, to just beat, because that's what was happening to them. If you think about it, the master was just beating them, but not explaining to them what they were doing wrong. And what was this book called? What's it? That's at 1960, probably 1950, somewhere up in there. I dodged and ran back into the house, then again to the hallway, my naked body flashing frantically through the air. I crossed in a dark corner. My mother rushed upon to me, breathing hard. I ducked, crawled, stood, and ran again. You may as well stand still, my mother said. I'm going to beat you tonight. This is the last thing I do on this earth. Again, she charged me, and I dodged, just missing the stinging string of the wet towel, and scooted into the room while my brother stood. What's the matter, he asked. Well, he had not heard what I said. A blow fell on my mouth. I whirled. Granny was upon me. She struck another blow on my head with the back of her hand. See? Now they both beating on the child. They ain't no, and it still ain't nobody. Hold on, Elijah. First of all, I said you're gonna do your work. Do the work. Get the coloring. Yes. Then my mother came into the room. I fell on the floor and crawled on the bed. You come out of the now, my mother called. Now, I cried. Come out or I'll beat you within an inch of your life. She said, no. I said, call Papa, Granny said. I trembled. Granny was sending my brother to fetch Grandpa, of whom I was mortally afraid. He was a tall, skinny, silent, grim black man who had fought in the Civil War with the Union Army. When he was angry, he gritted his teeth with a terrible grating sound. He kept his army gun in his room, standing in the corner loaded. He was under the delusion that the war between the states would be resumed. I heard my brother rush out the room, and I knew it was but a matter of minutes before Grandpa would come. I balled myself into a knot and moaned, no, no, no. Grandpa came and ordered me from under the bed. I refused to move. Come out of there, little man, he said. No. Do you want me to get my gun? No, son, please don't shoot me, I cried. Then come out. I remained still. Grandpa took hold of the bed and pulled it. I clung to the bedpost and was dragged over the floor. Grandpa ran at me and tried to grab my leg, but I crawled out of reach. I rested on all four and kept in the center of the bed, and each time the bed moved, I moved, following it. Come out and get your whipping, my mother called. I remained still. The bed moved, I moved. I did not think. I did not plan. I did not plot. Instinct told me what to do. There was painful danger, and I had to avoid it. Grandpa finally gave up and went back to his room. When you come out, you'll get your whipping, my mama said. No matter how long you're standing there, you gonna get it. Ain't no food for you tonight. Now let a parent tell a kid that this mess now, no food. Ooh, y'all swear up and down that it is a crime going on in that house. Not only that, white folks do it too. It's just not that time that it was back then. But you gotta understand, these ways was pushed into a lot of parents that was born back in this time, and they carry those ways over into their kids. It's a cycle. How do you think cycles are created? If you don't know, if you do know, tell me out in the comments. Now watch this little part. What did he do? My brother asked. Something he ought to be killed for, Granny said. But what? My brother asked. Shut up and get to bed, my mother said. Still, no one took the time to explain what he did wrong.
But his brother.
To him too, he was under the bed. So if they had told the brother what he did wrong, then he would have heard what he did wrong, and he would have probably came out and got his whooping. I stayed on the bed far into the night. The household went to sleep. Finally, hunger and thirst drove me out. When I stood up, I found my mother lurking in the doorway waiting for me. Come into the kitchen, she said. I followed her and she beat me, but she did not use the word towel. Grandpa had forbade it. Between strokes of the switch, she would ask me where I had learned the dirty words, and I could not tell her. And my inability to tell her made her furious. I'm going to beat you until you tell me, she declared. And I could not tell her because I did not know. None of the obscene words I had learned in school in Memphis had dealt the preventions of any sort. Although I might have learned the words while learning drunkenly in saloons. Right? Okay, so like I said, he was getting drunk and running in saloons. Something that his mama probably didn't even know about. So he already had secrets from her. And then she beating on him, asking him where he got it from, and then he don't even remember it. The next day, Granny said emphatically that she knew who had wrong with me, that she knew I had learned about foul practices from reading Ella's books. And when I asked what foul practices was, my mother beat me afresh. Still again, no one's explaining to him what he did wrong. It's looking like the white grandma don't want him to learn how to read, and the mama just going along with it, beating on the child. No matter how hard I tried to convince them that I had not read the words in the book, or that I could not remember having heard anyone say them, they would not believe me. Granny finally charged Ella with telling me things that I should not know, and Ella, weeping in the dark, packed her things and moved. The tremendous upheaval that my words had caused made me know that there lay back of them much more than I could figure out. And I resolved that in the future I would learn the meaning of why they had beat and denounced me. The days and hours began to speak with a clearer tongue. Each experience had a sharp meaning of its own. Right. There was a breathlessly anxious fun of chasing and catching fleeting fireflies and drowsy summer nights. There was a drenching hospitality in the pervading smell of sweet mangolies. There was an aura of limitless freedom distilled from the rolling sweeps of tall green grass swaying and glittering in the wind and the sun. There was a feeling of impersonal plenty when I saw a boil of cotton whose cup had spilt over and strangled its white fleece toward the earth. Why can't I just heal myself? There was a pity chuckle that bubbled in my throat when I watched a fat duck waddle across the backyard. There was a suspense I felt when I heard the top sharp song of a yellow-black bee hover nervously but patiently above a white rose. There was a drug sleepy feeling that came from sipping glasses of milk, drinking them slowly so that they would last a long time. And drinking enough for the first time in my life. I got it. Thank you, though. If I had a sad voice, I would use that. There was a bitter amusement of going into town with Granny and watching the baffled stares of white folks who saw an old white woman leading two undeniable Negro boys in and out of stores on Capitol Street. There was a slow, fresh, saliva-stimulating smell of cooking cotton seeds. It's time for you to finish your work. Why does it take you so long? There was the excitement of fishing in muddy country creeks with my grandpa on cloudy days. Ooh, I should better do this whole thing. Let's see. There was a fear and awe I felt when Grandpa took me to a sawmill to watch the giant rolling steel blades whine and scream as they bit into wet green logs. So you gonna do everything else but sit down and finish the work? You only getting 30 minutes after you do these two pages so you can do your math. And then I'm gonna look up a math site online for you to do and a reading site online for you to do. So come on. Because you ain't just going to the computer to do computer tasks. You're going to get 30 minutes after you do these 2 pages. And then you're going to get 32 pages, 30 minutes after you do your math pages. And then, like I said, you watch a program on TV. And then you want to do some math and reading on the computer. Okay? Okay? So hurry up. Well, you better wake it up. I apologize, y'all. To watch the giant rolling steel blades whine and scream as they bit into wet green logs. No, honey. There was a pleasure taste that almost made me cry when I ate my first half-ripe permission. There was a greedy joy in the tangy taste of wild hickory nuts. There was a dry hot summer morning when I scratched my bare arms on briars while picking blue blackberries and came home with my fingers and lips stained black with sweet berry juice. There was a relief of eating my first fried fish sandwich, nibbling it at it slowly and hoping that I would never eat it up. There was an all-night ache in my stomach after I climbed the neighbor's tree and eating stolen, unripe peaches. There was a morning when I thought I would fall dead from fear. I thought I had stepped with my bare feet upon a bright little green garden snake. And there was the long, slow, drowsy days and nights of drizzling rain. At last, we were at the railroad station with our bags, waiting for the train that would take us to Arkansas. And for the first time, I noticed that there were 2 lines of people at the ticket window, a white line and a black line. During my visit at Granny's, a sense of 2 races had been born in me with a soft concreteness that would never die until I died. When I boarded the train, I was aware that we Negroes were in one part of the train and that the whites were in another. Natively, I wanted to go and see how the whites looked while sitting in that part of the train. Can I go and peep at the white folks? I asked my mother. You keep quiet, she said. But that won't be wrong with it. What? Will you keep still? But why can't I? Quit talking foolishness. I had begun to notice that my mother became irritated when I questioned her about whites and blacks, and I could not quite understand it. I wanted to understand these 2 sets of people who lived side by side and never touched, it seemed, except in balance. Now, there was my grandmother. Was she white? Just how white was she? What did the whites think of her whiteness? Mama, is Granny white? I asked as the train rolled through the darkness. If you got eyes, you can see what color she is, my mother asked. I mean, do the white folks think she white? Why don't you ask the white folks that, she countered. But you know I insisted. Why should I know? She asked. I'm not white. Granny looks white, I said, hoping to establish one fact at least. Then why is she living with us colored folks? Don't you want Granny to live with us? She asked, blunt to my question. Yes. Then why are you asking? I want to know. Doesn't Granny live with us? Yes. Isn't that enough? But does she want to live with us? Why didn't you ask Granny that? My mama evaded me again in a taunting voice. Did Granny become colored when she married Grandpa? Will you stop asking silly questions? But did she? Granny didn't become colored, my mother said angrily. She was born the color she is now. Again, I was being shut out of the secret, the thing, the reality I felt somewhere beneath all the words and silence. Why didn't Granny marry a white man? I asked. Because she didn't want to, my mother said peevishly. Why don't you want to talk to me? I asked. She slapped me, and I cried. Later, grudgingly, she told me that Granny came of Irish, Scottish, and French stock in which Negro blood had somewhere and somehow been infused. She explained it all in a matter-of-fact, offhand, neutral way. Her emotions were not involved at all. Okay, get your pencil. You ain't color the cat. Color the cat. And then get your pencils, trace it, write it. What was Granny's name before she married Grandpa? Bolden. Who gave her that name? The white man who owned her. She was a slave? Yes. It says paste it. You gonna paste. Eliza, did you color the ball? Did you color the apple? Go to the first page. They're colored. Yep. Yep. So you can color the cat. And Bone was named Granny's father. Granny doesn't know who her father was. So they just gave her name. They gave her name. That's all I know. Couldn't Granny find out who her father was? For what, silly? So she could know. No, for what? Just to know. But for what? I could not say. I could not get anyone. Mama, where did father get his name? From his father. And where did the father of my father get his name? Like Granny got hers from a white man. Do they know who he is? I don't know. Why don't they find out? For what? My mother demanded harshly. And I can think of no rational, partial reason why my father should try to find out who his father was. What has Papa got in him? I asked. Some white, some red, and some black, she said. Indian, white, and Negro? Yes. Then what am I? They call you a colored man when you grow up, she said. Then she turned to me and smiled mockingly and said, Do you mind, Mr. White? I was angry and I did not answer. I did not object to being called colored, but I knew that there was something my mother was holding back. She was not concealing facts, but feelings and attitudes, convictions, which she did not want me to know. And she became angry when I prodded her. All right, I will find out someday. Just wait. All right, I was colored. It was fine. I did not know enough to be afraid or to anticipate in a concrete manner. True, I had heard that colored people were killed and beaten, but so far it all had seemed remote. There was, of course, a vague uneasiness about it all, but I would be able to handle that when I came to it. It would be simple. If anyone tried to kill me, then I would kill them first. When we arrived in the lane, I saw that Aunt Maggie lived in a bungalow that had a fence around it. It looked like home, and I was glad. I had no suspicion that I was to live here but for a short time and that a manner of my leaving would be my first baptism of racial emotion. A wildly dusty road ran past the house, and on each side of the road wild flowers grew. It was the summer, and the smell of clay dust was everywhere, day and night. I would get up early every morning to water with my bare feet through the dust of the road, revealing the strange mixture of the cold, dew-wet crust on top of the road and the warm, baked dust beneath. After sunrise, the bees would come out, and I discovered that by slapping my two palms together smartly, I could kill a bee. My mother warned me to stop, telling me the bees made honey, that it was not good to kill things that made food, that I would eventually be stung. But I felt confident if I wouldn't any bee. One morning I slapped an enormous bee beneath my hand just as it had lit upon a flower, and it stung me in the tender center of my left palm. I ran home screaming. Good enough for you, my mother commented dryly. I never crushed any more bees. Aunt Maggie's husband, Uncle Hoskins, owned a saloon that sent to the hundreds of Negroes who worked in the surrounding sawmills. I remember the saloon on my Memphis days. I begged Uncle Hope to take me to see it, and he promised. But my mother said no. She was afraid that I would grow up to be a drunken if I went inside of a saloon again while I was still a child, so she didn't know. Okay. Well, if I could not see the saloon, at least I could eat. And at mealtime, Aunt Maggie's table was so loaded with food that I could scarcely believe it was real. It took me some time to get used to the idea of there being enough to eat. I felt that if I ate enough, there would not be anything left for another time. When I first sat down at Aunt Maggie's table, I could not eat until I asked, Can I eat all I want? Eat as much as you like, Uncle Hoskins said. I did not believe him. I ate until my stomach hurt, but even then I did not want to get up from the table. Your eyes are bigger than your stomach, my mother said. Let him eat all he wants and get used to food, Uncle Hoskins said. When supper was over, I saw that there were many biscuits piled high up on the bread platter, an astonishing and unbelievable sight for me. Though the biscuits was right before my eyes, and though there were more flour in the kitchen, I was apprehensive, lest there be no bread for breakfast in the morning. I was afraid that somehow the biscuits might disappear during the night while I was sleeping. I did not want to wake up in the morning, as I had so often in the past, feeling hungry and knowing that there was no food in the house. So stubbornly, I took some of the biscuits from the platter and slipped them into my pocket, not to eat, but to keep as a bulwark against any possible attack of hunger. Even after I had got used to seeing the table loaded with food at each meal, I still stole bread and put it in my pocket. And watching in my clothes, my mother found the gummy wads and scolded me to break me of the habit. I stopped hiding the bread in my pockets and hid it about the house in corners behind dressers. I did not break the habit of stealing and hoarding bread until my faith with that food would be forthcoming and each meal has been somewhat established. Okay, good job. Hold on, y'all.
Can I do another one?
Yeah, you get another one. Where's my scissors?
Yeah, that's your card.
No, I know I got both my cards in them. Oh, y'all.
Another card.
Put them all back in there. Hold on, you almost done. Where your you got some glue?
What?
You got some glue?
That's a little.
Glue.
Yes. I think it's a little.
Your letter? I'm so sorry, y'all. Y'all gotta put on the floor for a little bit. Where's the glue? Okay, well, just go to the next page. Well, eat your fruit first and then go to the next page. I gotta get up and look for it. Uncle Hoskins had a horse and a buggy, and sometimes he used to. Hold on, let me see. Where can I leave y'all at? Leave y'all just anywhere. Okay, I'm gonna leave y'all at the. Okay, I'm gonna find out where I'm gonna leave y'all. He had a horse and a buggy, and sometimes he used to take me with him to Hella, where he traded. One day when I was riding with him, he said, "Richard, would you like to see this horse drink water out of the middle of the river?" "Yes," I said, laughing, "but this horse can't do it." "Yes, he can." Uncle Hoskins said, "Just wait and see." He lashed the horse and headed the buggy straight for the Mississippi River. "Where you going?" I asked, alarm mounting in me. "We're going to the middle of the river so the horse can drink," he said. He drove over the levee and down the long slope of cobblestones to the river's edge, and the horse plunged wildly in. I looked at the mild stretch of water that lay ahead and leaped up in terror. "No!" I screamed. "This horse has to drink," Uncle Hoskins said grimly. "The river's deep," I shouted. "The horse can't drink here," Uncle Hoskins said, lashing the back of the struggling animal. The buggy went farther. The horse slowed a little and tossed his head around above the current. I grabbed the sides of the buggy, ready to jump, even though I could not swim. "Sit down or you'll fall out," Uncle Hoskins shouted. "Let me out," I screamed. The water now came up to the hubs of the wheel of the buggy. I tried to leap into the river and he caught hold of my leg. We were now surrounded by water. "Let me out!" I continued to scream. The buggy rolled on and the water rose higher. The horse wagged its head, arched his neck, flung his tail about, walled his eyes, and snorted. I gripped the sides of the buggy with all the strength I had, ready to wrench free and leap if the buggy slipped deeper into the ocean. Uncle Hoskins and I tussled. "Whoa!" he yelled at last to the horse. The horse stopped and heaved. The swirling yellow water was so close that I could have touched the surface of the river. Uncle Hoskins looked at me and laughed. "Did you really think I was going to drive this buggy into the middle of the river?" I was too scared to answer. My muscles were so tense they ached. "It's all right," he said soothingly. He turned the buggy around and started back toward the levee. I was still clutching the sides of the buggy so tight that I could not turn them loose. "We safe now," he said. The buggy rolled onto dry land, and as my fear abated, I felt that I was dropping from a great height. I screamed that I could smell a sharp, fresh odor. My forehead was damp and my heart thumped heavily. "I want to get out," I said. "What's the matter?" he asked. "I want to get out." "Well, back on land now, boy." "Nah, stop. I want to get out." He did not stop the buggy. He did not even turn his head to look at me. He did not understand. I wrenched my leg free with a lunge and leaped headlong out of the buggy, landing in the dust of the road unhurt. He stopped the buggy. "Are you really that scared?" he asked softly. I did not answer. I could not. My fear was going now, and he loomed before me like a stranger, like a man I've never seen before, a man with whom I could never share a moment of intimate living. "Come on, Richard, and get back in the buggy," he said. "I'll take you home now." I shook my head and I began to cry. "You don't trust me no more, boy. You don't trust me no more, sorry." "Listen, son, don't you trust me? Hell no." He asked. "I was born on that old river. I know that river. The stone and brick way down under that water. You can wade out half a mile, and it will not come over your head." His words meant nothing. I could not re-enter that buggy. "I better take you home," he said soberly. I stared down the dust road. He got out of the buggy and walked beside me. He did not do his shopping that day, and when he tried to explain to me what he had been trying to do and frightening me, I would not listen or speak to him. I never trusted him after that. Right? Like, Shorty, you said you could take me to the middle of the water there. You really, sir, real life flies from my eyes, my life flies before my eyes right now. Whenever I saw his face, the memory of my terror up on the river would come back, vivid and strong. And it stood, where'd it go? No, go to the next page. What is food at? You put it back in the refrigerator? Okay, boom. Okay, let us. Well, I think one fell on the floor. And it stood as a barrier between us. Each day, Uncle Hoskins went to his saloon in the evening and did not return home until the early hours of the morning. Like my father, he slept in the daytime, but noise never seemed to bother as much as we liked. Often I would creep into his room while he slept and stare at the big shining revolver that lay near his head, within quick reach of his hand. I asked Aunt Maggie why he kept the gun so close to him, and she told me that the men had threatened to kill him, white men. One morning I waked to learn that Uncle Hoskins had not come home from the salon. Aunt Maggie fretted and worried. She wanted to visit the salon and find out what happened, but Uncle Hoskins had forbidden her to come to the place. The day wore on and dinner time came. "I'm going to find out if anything happened," Aunt Maggie said. "Maybe you aren't," my mother said. "Maybe it's dangerous." The food was kept hot on the stove, and Aunt Maggie stood on the front porch staring into the deep dust. And then she declared she was going to the salon, but my mother disillusioned her once more. "What you looking for?" "I don't know." It grew dark and still he had not come. Aunt Maggie was silent and restless. "I hope to God the white man didn't bother him," she said. Later she went to the bedroom, and when she came out she whimpered. He didn't take his gun. I wonder what could happen. We ate in silence. An hour later there was a sound of heavy footsteps on the porch, and a loud knock came. Aunt Maggie ran to the door and flung it open. A tall black boy stood sweating, panting, and shaking his head. He pulled his cap off. "Mr. Hoggins, he done been shot." "Done been shot by a white man," the boy gasped. "Miss Hoggins, he dead." Aunt Maggie screamed and rushed off the porch and down the dusty road into the night. "Maggie!" my mother screamed. "Don't you all go to that salon!" the boy screamed. "Maggie!" my mother called, running after Aunt Maggie. "They kill you if you go there," the boy yelled. "White folks say they kill all his kinfolks." My mother put Aunt Maggie back to the house. Fear drowned out our grief that night. We packed clothes and dishes and loaded them into the farmer's wagon. Before dawn, we were rolling away, fleeing for our lives. Long afterwards, Uncle Hoskins had been killed by whites who had long converted his frozen liquor business. He had been threatened with death and warned many times to leave, but he had wanted to hold on a while longer to amass more money. We got room in West Helena, and Aunt Maggie and my mother kept huddled in the house all day and night, afraid to be seen in the street. Finally, Aunt Maggie defied her fear and made frequent trips back to Elaine, but she went in secret in that night and would tell no one save my mother when she was gone. Yep, we're gonna leave it right there. And afterward, we're gonna come back. When I do come back, we're gonna see if it was a funeral. I feel like I gotta. I'm gonna. So okay. So what we're gonna do is later on today, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna give y'all questions because I didn't give y'all video yesterday. So I feel like I owe y'all something. But then I gotta start back reading because I owe myself that, not you.